I am William L. Boucher, President and Chief Executive. Actually, my banking career spanned 57 years. I came over to First Security Bank in April of 1991 and worked full-time and then part-time, and finally retired after that many years. O'Brien somehow found out that I was available, so he called and wanted to have lunch with me. He interviewed me and hired me on the spot.
I don't know if Bill talked about it, but they made a deal that, you know, if Bill would go to work for John and help and clean it up and get things right, John would sell the bank to him for a price, not knowing, of course, that it was going to go gangbusters when Bill took over and Bill's team, which it did. But John was a man of his word. He was a real solid guy. Craig and I both got an education by fire in that process between then and when John O'Brien came in. He taught both of us a lot. Bill really was the mentor for both of us in how to do things right.
I told O'Brien, you have the whole staff there, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to lay the law down, and this is how things are going to be. They needed some discipline and order.
So Bill, the very first day, came in with these recipe cards, and there was probably about 20 of them. And he just went down, boom, 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 and it was, you're going to be on time for work. There'll be no fraternizing. If there is, one of you, both of you will be gone. What he expected, the way it was going to be, just expected you to do your job, do it well. If you have any questions, come to him. Open door policy. Let's make this bank successful.
Well, Bill came in with a game plan, obviously, and what Bill did was he gave First Security credibility, because everybody knew who Bill Boucher was, not just in Missoula, but in Montana banking circles. And so, you know, Chris Swartley and I have talked about this. You know, we were a little intimidated because we knew Bill by reputation. I didn't bank with Bill. I didn't have a lot of direct CPA clients with Bill, but I just knew Bill was kind of no nonsense. And yeah, he came in with a script, so to speak, and set about making First Security a first-class banking structure, not just as an institution, but it started with the board too. And so he looked at board members and made it clear that we had a duty and a responsibility, and he expected us to fulfill that.
So Bill Boucher, when he came to the bank, he had specific ideas and had been very successful at his previous location, and so he wanted to make sure that we all knew initially what his expectations were of all of the employees from the top to the bottom. And I do remember one of the things that he specifically, I'm not going to say harped on, but he instilled in us was confidentiality. This is a bank. You do not talk about who you did business with, how much money they have in the bank. That was all very clear to us. And if you did, there would be repercussions. That is why I think a lot of people in Missoula and around Missoula have so much respect for Bill Boucher still to this day, because they knew they could trust him and the people that he had employed. I believe that, you know, from the tellers to the customer service people on the phone, they were always taught to be friendly, call your customer by your name. All of those things that make you feel good is how we were taught. All along, you were doing education and training about how to take care of your customer. they are the number one person. If they weren't there, we wouldn't be there either.
That is quite an interesting story. Remember so distinctly the board meeting that day. So we're all sitting there. So we're brainstorming. We like to find a new logo, a good one. So we're sitting there, and I give Earl Pirnie all the credit. I mean, I witnessed it. I listened to it no matter what anybody says. Earl says, "Bill, what about a horse?" So we talked about it a little more, and we said, "Well, why don't we get Spiker to run on this?" And we come up with this psychedelic stallion. Phyllis would drive around with my granddaughter or daughters. They'd always say, "Grandma, there's Grandpa's horse in his bank," you know. That was always amusing to me. So that's kind of the end of that story, how it played out with Larry, and what a great person. Well, I love it. I makes me feel great, and that I maybe had a little part in helping out get it, and it's lasted, golly, and everybody loves it, and I don't think you hardly have to put our name up on the board. You'd put the logo in there and people recognize it, I think. So it's been awesome.
You know, it's interesting. My first thought on the horse was this was extraordinary for Bill Boucher. He doesn't dress in bright colors or do anything that's not too straight, but he had an incredible idea that was ahead of its time. The bank logos, the first, second national, first national, it's just all so boring. This horse represents leading the pack, strength, speed, kind of everything we wanted to embody. It was sort of an amazing thing. We didn't think that much about it because it was something we fell in love with immediately. I think the whole board. We didn't question it. It's interesting how timely it is and how ahead of its time it was. Because every time they put up a new thing, you know, the lead horse, the whatever billboard that they're putting up at the moment, it's so right now. It's just incredible. So it was just a right time, a right place. Mind-boggling. You know, the horse still makes me feel like we're in charge, like we're leading the pack, like we're colorful, innovative, strong, all of the things that you associate with the lead horse. It's actually more in tune now than even when we started it. It lets us, I think, break out from the boredom of all of the other firsts and seconds and uniteds and so on.
So when you see that horse, what do you think?
Well, I think of leadership because of the strength of the horse, the colors of the horse. All of those things to me are beautiful. And Bill, it was his idea to do something like that because we really didn't have a brand prior to that. And I never heard anything but compliments about our bank logo and how nice it really was compared to some of the other ones that are just kind of boring.
The horse came about from really quite honestly from a relationship that Bill and I had before this ever happened. Really, Bill had a vision as he thought through the whole process. The leader was really what he wanted that horse to represent. I can't even recall all of the back and forth that I needed to just hear what is he really expecting from this horse. Before I became a painter, as I had mentioned, I was in advertising marketing. most banks, most people that want to give a symbol of solidity, they got to have a black and white, solid, rectangular, whatever shape to communicate that kind of business. I was still not believing that this bank president was really going to want it to be as colorful and playful as the kid in me wanted to make it. Bill's feeling about banking is that kind of energy. It's not a protective, not an image of solidarity. That's not what he's preoccupied with. He's really preoccupied with whatever that whole vision that he spent all these years creating in terms of the service he provides his community in so many different ways.
I have become very proud. I'm very proud because that horse has come to signify an organization that I take a lot of pride in. And the way that Larry started with a picture and what this team has done, including you and Kristen and the rest of us, we have made that psychedelic horse a little bit iconic. It makes me proud.
And Bill was big about giving back to the community. He was very community involved. And so I remember being in board meetings or talking to different members of, loan officers, people who I worked a lot with, and they were encouraged to get involved in Missoula, get involved in, if you think about all the things that bank was involved in, it was amazing. It started, baseball. Hal Frazier got me involved in the bank in Missoula Children's Theater. There's countless stories of the things that bank employees did, and Bill was just, led the way, if you will, in that regard.
That was expected. We were going to get involved with the community, although we were already with Hal's methodology. That was kind of how Hal ran things. He was so involved in the community, and he encouraged everybody to get involved, because it just, it just makes you feel so good when you can help somebody. So really that philosophy was already there, but when Bill came on board, that philosophy was full bore. I mean, everybody was on board with that. Either you get involved or you're probably out the door. And yeah, it was huge.
Well, his absolute way of thinking, and that of Hal Frazier, who's now deceased, of course, was totally the same way. Customers, community, and the bank, obviously. They were always into profit sharing. They cobbled together loans for community nonprofit organizations that could have never been done, including Children's Theater when I was on that board. I mean, they would go together and get each financial institution to take responsibility for a piece of the loan, and they just did amazing things.
Like to support the community, making a lot of money, so always had a good donation budget, and like to participate, capital campaigns, operating stuff. The one thing I liked about what we did was we budgeted ourselves. We didn't have the holding company telling us what we could spend, how much when, or anything. That's an advantage we always had, because the corporate banks, they had X to spend. Hell, if you didn't have your request in now, you'd have to wait till next year to get in. So we had all this latitude to do donations, which gave us an up in the community. We expected, we wanted everybody to be satisfactory, to be on 2 boards or 2 nonprofits, maybe on a committee. So if you were on 2, you're satisfactory. 3, excellent. If you had 4, then that was an outstanding on the review system. And that was also 10% of review. So 20% of your review was based on those 2 things, which I really liked. Fundraising, we were on a lot of campaigns. You think a couple of hospital campaigns, the business drive at the university, hospital campaigns that We're on a sustained drive for the Community Hospital Foundation. We did the YMCA, $6 million, $2 million. We remodeled the building twice. We did the food bank for Aaron Brock as far as donations. There was a day when I think we pretty much gave to about anybody that asked us, but I think we went away from that a little bit, maybe more customer oriented, which I think is only right. I don't think we have to give to every dog in town. So, but that's been big for the bank, and always supported that, love to help the community. I mean, if you're making, always making a lot of money, why not put some back in the community? Why not get that goodwill from these nonprofits? And we got a lot of them.
I just don't feel it's any of our roles to simply do things to gain, you know, not respect, but to get accolades. Like for instance, when we consider, you know, our donations and our volunteer work and everything, I think we'd be just not doing this service to anybody if we were to look at that and say, well, how's that going to make us look? I think we need to first of all say, what is right for those that are asking, and how does that fit into our mission and our mission statement and our culture? And then just do the right thing. And if something comes from it in which we may be looked at in a positive light, so be it. And that's the way maybe corporates should be, more like. But don't run your business just to get, you know, these extended accolades from whoever. Do the right thing. Do the right thing for those that are around you, and I think it all comes back in tenfold.
Well, and Burke, he can pipe in here. I might have it wrong, but I think, you know, I never did know him as a kid, even though I'm related to his family. We have that much age difference. So he goes to California in his banking career, and he's a hell of a salesman for a big bank. I think he calls me one day and says, you got any jobs? I said, well, I don't know if I have a job. What do you need? Well, he said, I want to come to Montana. I want to raise my kids. I want to come home, you know, which is great. Want to raise your kids in a good place, right? So he comes and interviews. Of course, I hire him, and so it goes on. He's a good salesman, really a good lender, very good at everything he did. About when I'm thinking about semi-retiring, probably, how am I going to do this? So I developed a questionnaire. So the idea of this was to ask the question, you know, who do you want to lead the bank, and who will you support? Well, it was unanimous for Scott. Berkey gets the job, and you know, we are third cousins. My dad and his grandpa on the Tekka side are first cousins. He got the job because he was the most qualified, not because he was a relative of Boucher.
I remember the day that Scott Burke came in for his first interview, and it was not that Bill seeked him out. It was Scott living in California, ready to come back to Montana, make a life here with his young family. And he just asked Bill if he had some time, came in and interviewed, and apparently interviewed well, came in as a commercial lender. And from that, the rest is history. You know, Bill had sent out a little questionnaire to all the officers. If he were to retire, who would they think would best fit the position? Somebody outside the bank, somebody within the bank, and pretty much everybody nominated Scott Burke. So he already had the support of the staff. It seems like Scott is a combination of both Hal and Bill. He can keep things pretty light-hearted, funny, but at the same time, there's a lot of seriousness that goes on, and he's very serious at times. And he's earned just a lot of respect from the whole staff. I think they all respect him tremendously. And he's earned it. He deserves it, just like Bill did and just like Hal did.
Great guy. I have nothing but the greatest faith in the bank because they keep bringing on good people. Why I've stuck with them this long is because they're good people. You couldn't find better people. And they're good for business. They know exactly what's going on, and they will do their best to help you succeed. And I know that Bill's helped me an awful lot during those years that we were just starting out. And Bill was raised as a person that you're honest, and that's the only way you go. And yeah, that's exactly right. That's what he does, and you could feel it in him when you talk to him. I guess I had the opportunity for some time to be good friends with him and Phyllis and the boys and stuff like that. And that's kind of a good feeling.
The way I found out is, as Bill always would, he's very notorious for grabbing a couple of the gang and going out for a beer after work. And he said, "Hey, Berkey, you want to meet at the press box for a beer?" And I said, "I'd love to." So after work, I went down there thinking the whole crew was going to be there, and it was he and Phyllis sitting at the table. And I go, "Well, what's going on?" And he said, "We just wanted to have a beer with the new president of the bank." That's the first I had any idea that it was even thought about. I knew we all filled out the same information that Bill asked us to, but I was absolutely floored.
I don't know. I think leadership, surround yourself with good people and listen. I think I was a good listener.
So a leader, both Hal and Bill both, do not, in my opinion, have an ego. That has to be fulfilled. I think they do it because it's just the right thing to do. I guess a leader is their example of, and Bill would never say this or Hal would never say this, how much they give to the community. They help the community out of their own pocket, not just through the bank, but it's both. It's both through the bank and out of their own pockets. And that to me is just, not everybody can do that, obviously. And Bill's and so was Hal, very humble, I guess I would use.
But it's kind of like anything. I believe a leader is someone who doesn't necessarily preach, but by example shows the way to go and how to go. And I always felt that Bill was very consistent with that he acted like a leader. But if you met him on the street or met him in a cafe or someplace, you'd never know he was a bank president. There's nothing about Bill that reminds me of past bank presidents that I've dealt with over the years. And quite honestly, Scott, who's come in after him and that Bill selected, is the same way. They're just, they know their responsibility. Their value system is consistent with what that horse has represented to a lot of people who do business with the bank. That I hear from my neighbors. And so to me, I think that's Bill's idea of what a leader is to be.
His methods: persuasion. When he was recruiting people, bankers and so on, he recruited them with those same ideas, that you're not just going to be in a pecking order where you're required to get X amount of loans per week or month or day or whatever, but that you had to be part of this bigger vision of the bank.
The other thing a great leader does is hold people accountable. And that's one of Bill's really great strengths, is holding people accountable, and yet in a way that you can grow from the experience. everybody makes mistakes. And I think leaders get people to understand we all make mistakes. What did you learn? What did, and what do we modify to go forward? And I think that's what Bill really did. The other thing that is difficult is you can be a leader and grow a company. How do you transition that company? And it's really difficult sometimes for people to let go or to nurture somebody to take over for you. And if you think about Bill and then Scott, and Bill looking, and I remember as a board member, when Bill would talk about retirement, we're going, oh my gosh, how do you replace a legend, okay? And so you do so carefully, thoughtfully, and over time. And what I mean by over time is that, Bill didn't go and leave right away. He still was there. He was on the board offering advice, but he let go of the reins. We're in a horse barn filming, and we know that the Larry Pirnie stallion leads the way for the bank. And so horses are always a big part of First Security Bank. But he let go of the reins and nurtured Scott Burke to be our new leader. And Scott came in with great credentials and a wonderful personality and a great skill set. And Scott's one of those guys that let people do their thing. He really sets the example and lets them do their work, supports them, and so that transition really worked well for the bank, and and the results are legendary.
I got started with Bill Boucher many, many years ago. What I liked about Bill Boucher, he's an honest man. If he tells you something, believe it, because it's the truth. I went with different banks before, and when I met Bill Boucher, I would have said to myself, I'm going to go with this guy. This is a good guy. Bill's always impressed upon me that that's the type of guy he is, and he's never shown any reason to doubt that.
And in terms of leadership, I think I look at Bill as just a wonderful leader, and again, somebody with a gigantic heart. And I think if you can lead, you got to understand people, and none of us understand all people, but I understand when we have good people around, and I tend, just like Bill and Hal, be able to pick out a few good people every now and then, but I just think it's just getting everybody trying to work on the same page, going down the right path, and the path always has to be for the betterment of others. And it kind of simplifies that whole thing of leadership if you look at it like that.
I couldn't run the bank like Scott does today because there's a lot of stuff I'm not interested in, and if I didn't get on the idiot box and if I didn't do email, there's no possible way to run the bank, and particularly of the size of a billion-dollar bank. There's no possible way. So I had a good run and have a lot of good people around me. Well, it certainly has been fun, and I'd have to say there wasn't a day I didn't wake up and want to run to work. So as far as the future, well, when I see these kids, well, technology seems like it is, like how are you going to deliver to these kids? I'm not excited about that, but that's the way it is. So, and convenience, how do you bank? We better give them an easy way to do it, probably on your phone.